So I just got finished watching Messiah 2030. It's a documentary on YouTube. There's a couple parts to it, which does a very in-depth and detailed explanation of why they think the second coming is in 2030. But some of the assumptions they're making and calendar um, doesn't line up. I mean, what I do agree with is we are definitely in the end of days. I just think it's sooner than they realize. And I'm going to get into that. But, long story short, God built a creation in day one. The clock runs for 6,000 years. A day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is but a day. That's in Peter. So we're basically at the end of it. Specifically, too long didn't watch. The year 2026, Feast of Trumpets, is going to be the most convergent prophetic target for this generation, and I'm going to explain why. So, firstly, Genesis 1 records 6 days of creation followed by a day of rest. Same thing. I highly recommend watching that documentary. He'll get way deeper into it. The only issue is the way he calculates 2030 is by using the Talmud. And they specifically reference a period of 40 years after Jesus' crucifixion where they could not do temple sacrifice. Like, God, there was all kinds of miraculous things happening that prevented them, the thing with the red cord, not being able to light the eternal flame, like all kinds of stuff, all the way up to the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, which actually falls right smack dab in the middle of a 7 year quote unquote tribulation that is in Matthew 24, because a lot of people don't realize that's actually about a prophecy of the destruction of the temple, which, that 7 year war between 66 AD and 73 AD, so, 70 AD is right in the middle, bam, and he said that, surely these things will come to pass before your generation ends. He was talking to the people then and there. They saw it in their lifetime. So that definitely fulfills that. I know there's a lot of people that are trying to push, end time tribulation thing, and they're fine to think about that if they want to, but I'm pretty sure Matthew 24 was already fulfilled. In the 6 days of creation and a day of rest, the reason that's important is because if you use that timeline of a day as 1,000 years and 1,000 years is a day, on the first couple of days, God created everything. Jesus would have came around the fourth day. It's always 4 and 3, right? Leading to 7 is the number of completion, right? So that's year 7,000. The day of rest is supposed to be that millennial reign. So I believe it was Psalm 90. That's what it was. Psalm 90. 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by. And 2 Peter 3:8. It says, with the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years like a day. So if you apply Genesis to 6 days of creation plus a day of rest, you get 6,000 years of human history before the messianic rest, or that, millennial reign. And Revelation 20 calls it the millennial kingdom, a reign of Christ on earth. It's actually not just a modern idea. The Babylonian Talmud, Sanhedrin 97a, written by Jewish rabbis of the first century, say that the world will exist for 6,000 years. In the seventh millennium, it will be desolate. And the rabbis of the early church held that exact framework independently. Irenaeus, writing around 180 AD, was a disciple of Polycarp, who was a direct disciple of the Apostle John, who wrote Revelation. And Irenaeus documented a 6,000 year framework as the explicit expectation of the early church. And that goes all the way back to the source, who wrote Revelation. So this framework is ancient. There's multiple sources that maps to that 6,000 years of human history. It's not a new idea. So they do have sound doctrine in that documentary. So the question is, where do we land on that 6,000 year spectrum? Because we have the Gregorian calendar, and there's all these different ways to measure time. The current Jewish calendar, I'm not sure exactly the year, but it's like 5,000 something. They're off. Then there's also the Essene calendar, which is similar to the Book of Enoch, where it's cleanly divided into 364 days and not 365.25. So in Genesis, right, the creation of the sun and moon is on day 4. So Jesus called himself the light of the world. It's basically like a structural marker, right? So in Hosea 6:2, that was written in like 700 BC. After 2 days, he will revive us, and on the third day, he'll restore us, that we may live in his presence, which applies definitely to that day and age principle. So 2 prophetic days equals 2,000 years. 1,000 years after Jesus, you have the restoration of Israel, right? And 2,000 years after Jesus, you have, the full kingdom. So if Jesus represents the end of the year 4,000, there's two more prophetic days, um, each of 1,000 years, right? Which the year 6,000 is 2,000 years after him, right? Most people debate the crucifixion date between 30 AD and 33 AD. Conservative, people, they land on 33 AD for a couple of reasons. Luke 3:1 places John the Baptist beginning his ministry in the 15th year of Tiberius. Historical records say that's about 28 to 29 AD. Jesus began his ministry after John, right? So 3.5 year ministry from 29 AD ends in 33 AD. And 33 AD also has the April 4th, I believe it was. It lands on Good Friday was, I think it was the third actually. I think it's the same as this year. It lands on the same day on a Friday, and there was also a lunar eclipse during that time. So that's why a lot of people lean towards 33 AD. There's stronger evidence there. Daniel 9 has another confirmation. It describes 483 prophetic years if you use the 360-day prophetic months. Yeah, from rebuild Jerusalem to the coming of the Messiah. Sometime in like 44 BC, and this is documented in Nehemiah 2, 1 through 8. If you count 483 years of 360 days forward from 444 BC, that date is the week of Jesus' entry into Jerusalem, Palm Sunday in 33 AD. So you have two independent chronological systems. You have Luke's Tiberius anchor date, and you have Daniel's 483 year clock that both point to 33 AD. It's definitely a stronger candidate than 2030. Whereas that documentary, they used the Talmud only talking about the 40 years, and they decounted back from 70 AD, the destruction of the temple, which, it makes sense why they picked that year, but I feel like there's more evidence, more weight for the 33 AD. Well, how does this all fit? And if you look at the Essene calendar, right? The Essenes were a Jewish community. They made the Dead Sea Scrolls that were discovered in 1947. They use a 364-day solar calendar that are divided into 4 equal 13-week quarters. And because 364 divides evenly by 7, every feast date falls on the same day of the week every year without exception, right? So the temple establishment used a lunar calendar of 354 days. Both ran simultaneously in the first century of Judea, right? Why that matters is because in the Synoptic Gospels of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John, they describe the Last Supper as a Passover meal. John places the crucifixion one day before the official Passover. And that's a direct contradiction, apparently, But anyway, in 1957, Jesus observed Passover on an Essene calendar date, right? Which is Tuesday evening. So he was arrested Tuesday night. Multiple trials went across Wednesday and Thursday, and then he was crucified on Friday, the temple calendar, which was the calendar's Passover preparation day. So both gospel traditions are correct. They're just using different calendars. So that resolves Matthew 12:40. And Jesus said he would be in the tomb for 3 days and 3 nights. Friday's crucifixion to Sunday morning produces 36 to 40 hours, right? Not 72. The Essene calendar's Tuesday crucifixion through Sunday resurrection gives a full 72 hours. So the calendar system resolves the gospel tension, the 3 days and 3 nights problem, with a single solution, right? So the Essene year is 364 days. The Gregorian year is 365.25, like 2425 or something like that. Anyway, so over 2,000 years, that difference accumulates, right? Because about like a 7-year difference. If you go by Gregorian years, that's 1,993 years, not 2,000, right? So in 33 AD plus 1,993 years equals 2026. So the Essene calendar is the most chronologically accurate ancient calendar that we have available. And that one resolves the Passion Week contradiction. Counted forward 2,000 of its own years to the resurrection. It lands on 2026. So that's how we get from the crucifixion to 2026 with the mathematical precision of like, hey, this calendar year lands on 6,000.